All right. So let's see here. I'm just going to bring up my other camera viewing thing there, right there. Perfect. Okay. So thanks everybody for joining me today. I am Daphne Cote, a professional artist and art instructor, and today I want to show you how to draw eyeballs. They're super fun. And one of the biggest parts about drawing a portrait is capturing the eyes. And they're really interesting. We look at everybody's eyes, we fall in love with people's eyes, so let's get started. I'm going to be using charcoal pencils. I've got an eraser here, a blending stomp if I need it, but let's just get started on the eyes. I like to think of eyes as big, huge caves, and you got to start with the eye socket. So it's not just the eyeball that's the most important part, it's actually the eye socket and the way that the light falls across our faces and creates this dramatic area in here where there's a lot of high contrast between light and shadow. So there's little bits of really dark next to little bits of really light, and that's what gives us that sparkle and what draws attention to our eyes. The most important part about the eyes is that the eyebrow here and the shape of this area is really, really important because it gives the shape of the whole cast shadow that falls down on our face. And when we're born, we have this thing like that's ingrained in us in the back of our mind to look for what is two dark shapes and then another small dark shape, which is the shadow under our nose, because we're looking for food when we're infants, and we know that that configuration of two dark spaces and a little dark space underneath, we recognize that as being a person and a human being that we can call out to and attach to for a food source. So that's deeply ingrained in our brains to look for that. And if you take off somebody's eyebrows, or if you don't get their eyebrows correct, then often you can't tell who that person is. So often it's not the actual eyeball itself that's incorrect, it's usually the placement or the shape of the eye socket that's incorrect that makes somebody look like or not look like the actual person, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we're going to start off with our eyes, and I'm going to bring you a little bit closer, and let's see here. Can we see that a little bit better? I know you're a little bit closer to me now. Okay, so I want to draw an eye socket, and an eye socket is kind of like a sideways butterfly. So if you think about it as a shape kind of like that, this is the side of our nose, and then this is the outside part. So we can think about the top of the eyebrow. So if this is the nose shape in here, then you've got the eyebrow, which usually is thicker on the inside, and then I'm just going to move this camera a little bit closer here. There we go. That's a bit better. So the eyebrow is a little bit thicker, closer to the nose, and then we have a shadow, and we have this cave that falls in like that, and then we have our eye, which is like a ball, which fits into this socket, and then we have eyelids that go over our eyeball that holds our eyeball into place. And so that's really important. And that starts off our whole shape of our eye. So in and around, if you even just feel on your own face, the top portion of where your eyebrow is, there's lots of muscles in here, and that's what helps create all of that expression. When we are feeling emotions, we create expression, and it usually moves our eyebrows here or furrows our brow, and we get these little lines above our nose. So basically that creates a shape on the top that gives a lot of expression. And then we want to just, whenever I'm trying to figure out a portrait, I usually start off with those dark caverns like that. And then that usually helps me to figure out if I have the right configuration and spacing of the eyes, how much space is in between those shadows over the nose, and where does the light hit, and all of those different types of things. So the light usually is coming from above. We mimic that with sunlight, so we always have it coming from above. And then this area here usually gets to be the darkest. And we have our eyelids, which, if you look from the side, here's our eyeball, is that the top eyelid goes over top of the bottom. And there's also space between the edge of our eyelid because our eyelid has a bit of bulk to it. So there's a space here and a space here, and it often captures light along this edge. So I don't like to think of drawings or creating images of people as a bunch of different outlines. That's what makes like a cartoon character. But all of these lines I consider to be shapes of tonal value. So when you're thinking about the shape of tonal value, the line that goes across here, it's going to either be light or dark, and it can transition from light to dark as well. So then we also have to think of our eyelashes, and they come out of our eyelids like that, and there's a bit of space. And typically for our bottom eyelashes, we don't tend to draw them in at all, just because normally our tools aren't fine enough, and we typically from a distance don't see a lot of the things that are happening in this area. We might see them as a bit of shadow, but they're very subtle and light. Okay, the other thing about eyes is that we've got an upper eyelid, we've got the lower eyelid, and sometimes we don't see these lines coming all the way across, and depending on our age, it can define how many actual lines and folds that we see in this area here. So the top eyelid goes over top of the bottom eyelid, and then you have this really interesting area over here which tends to get a little bit darker but often has a little bit of highlights, because you have to also remember that our eyes are wet. And then sometimes this area here, because it protrudes a little bit, gets a little bit lighter, and all of this area in here gets to be darker. And then because this area is even darker right by the nose, it gets even darker, making this area look lighter, whereas this area is probably like the same tonal value as like over here. So we're trying to create that little cavern for our eyeball to sit into. And then this area here is where your cheekbone is, and the eye starts to come out of that area, so that would be lighter because the light is coming and shining down on that area. So the other thing about eyes is that, so we have like our pupil and iris, but we also have the shadow that the top eyelid casts down over top of the eye. And so you need to keep that in mind. So, and I like to think of the eyelashes. Let's just go back to the eyelashes here. Just think of them as one solid type of line or shape, and that usually helps. And then I've already got some sort of natural shadow happening over top of the eyeball right here. And then we don't see the top of the iris very often because our eyelid usually covers it to some degree. If you see the top of it, that means that our eyes are really wide open and we tend to look a little bit crazy. So there we go. So we've got some different things happening here, and just pushing the light and shadow. Maybe creating this a little bit darker in there. There we go. And then adding some more characteristics to the eyebrows, which often determines whether it's a man or a woman, because women tend to keep their eyebrows a little bit more well kept. But for the most part, that is how I would draw an eye. And again, you really want to pay attention to the actual subject that you're looking at to see how there's different nuances, because really we're not all like almond shaped or perfect. Some are droopier. Tend to just look at all the different angles in which eyes come in, and both eyes will not be the same. It just doesn't exist. When we have two eyes, we're two organic of creatures, and they are just different. And so it's more important that you get them different than trying to make them exact. We'll just look like weird cyborgs if you do that. Anyway, so if you have any comments or questions or anything like that, please post them here, and I will try to get back to you as quickly as possible. And I hope that you enjoy some of my other videos that I've been making, and share them and post them and do what you will with them. I just want to spread all of this drawing and painting education as far as it can go, so that hopefully it reaches the right people that need it and that can use it. I'm also teaching a bunch of online courses, and you can register for them. They're private courses. I have a portrait drawing class coming up quite quickly, and that is this January 2020. And that I'm pretty excited for, and so I just wanted to give this a little bit of a quick demo, try this Facebook Live out, and hopefully get some people out there drawing and interested in drawing portraits. So this is Daphne Cote, professional artist and art instructor, signing off, saying thank you for watching, and I had fun with you this afternoon. All right, take care.